people think that mountaineers go out to conquer nature, whereas Tibetans look at these mountains, and not just Tibetans, I would say many of the South Asians, even in our culture, like we revere these mountains as the abode of gods and goddesses.
Hey everyone, it's Mindrolling, and I am back. That is I, Raghu, and I'm back with just an incredible human being that you're going to hear about in many different facets of life, Wasfia Nazreen. Welcome, Wasfia. So great to have you.
Thank you so much, Raghu. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, well, the honor is all mine. So I did not know Wasfia, which I later thought, why not? Because the accomplishments would have been very spread across the world. And but my good friend Krishna Das, we were together recently talking about podcasts. He said, "Oh, you must talk to Wasfia Nazreen. She has quite a story." So I want to get into the story, but it has to start with how your environment when you were growing up and where you grew up, which obviously the connections to India are very strong with me and then many of the people that are on this podcast network and so on. So yeah, I want to hear all the details, Wasfia.
Oh my God, we might need more than 1 hour for that.
We'll do part 2, 3, whatever.
Yes. Well, my beginning life was, I was born and raised the first 13 years in 2 different parts of Bangladesh called Khulna and Chittagong. A lot of people may be familiar with the Bay of Bengal, where the Bengal tigers are from. So my first few years on earth was very near there. And it was a blessing in so many ways now that I look back, because my first introduction to earth, even though I was predominantly in a very patriarchal and Muslim society, we knew it was ingrained in our psyche to really know who the big boss is, which is Mother Earth. And because of the town being so close to the ocean, we were constantly, like my earliest memory is just witnessing Mother's fury, but also knowing that, there are certain protocols that we can do, certain rituals we can do, certain ways of life we can maintain in order to bring balance. So that was a small town. It's called a city, but it's still like a rural city called Khulna, which is the gateway to the Bay of Bengal and the largest delta on the planet. And then I moved to a place which in historic text, when it was all India, that place is referred as Chativaho, and present day it's called Chittagong, which is in southeastern part of Bangladesh. And that's where majority of the minority Buddhists are based in Bangladesh. Another region that people may relate to is where the Rohingya refugees are coming from Myanmar to this territory. I bring in Chativaho because I know we're definitely going to go into a lot of the teachings, Tibetan Buddhist teachings or Vedic teachings, and a lot of it historically came from what used to be Chativaho. It was the seat of all the pundits back in the day. So even
you mean the Indian philosophers, pundits, and teachers?
Because back then
from
it was
Nalanda.
Yes, exactly. So what was Nalanda and Maharashtrapur? It was two different monasteries, and back then, people used to go on pilgrimages for months and weeks and months just to get from one destination to another. Now we have the facility to just be on an airplane and get to our teachers, right? So back then it's all referred as Chativaho. And then after that, and to the audience who may not be aware, what is now present-day Bangladesh India and Pakistan back then was all the British India.
Yeah.
And there are many different sayings by different British officers that we have tamed majority of India, but these Bengalis, we don't know how to figure them out because Bengalis, by essence, my ethnicity, are rebels. And so, yeah, and then after, when I was beginning of the age of 13, it's a very long story, but two of the most tragic events in my life happened, first one being my mom, my birth mother, refusing to take my any responsibility in abandoning me. And then that led to a series of events, which I won't get into, resulting in losing my home, everything that I knew, my father refusing because of the marriage he was in, refusing my responsibility as well. So it kind of pushed me from the age of 13 to 18 to work really hard and really know that my freedom was only going to come from educating myself. And at that time, I didn't know how to speak English. I went to a Hope Bengali medium school, which is my mother tongue. And so 3 years before literally the final national exam, I had to transfer to an English medium school. Not I had to, I chose to. I requested an aunt at the age of 13 to take me in, who lived in the capital, Dhaka. And then she took me in, she and her husband, and I worked through really rigorous discipline, got into an English medium school, worked really hard. And as soon as I was 18, because my way of getting out of that situation was to really educate myself and stand on my own, because if I stayed back, I would probably be married off, because, women, majority women's ultimate summit in South Asia is that marriage. And and that's how I ended up in Decatur, Georgia, at the age of barely 19, thinking that I was coming to New York, or a place that looks similar to New York, because I was...
Wait. You were where were you? Were in Calcutta?
No, I was in Bangladesh, and I applied to different colleges abroad in America, UK, and Australia, knowing that, my picture of America was all New York, because that's all we saw.
Yeah.
And so this one college out of the 20 plus colleges that I probably got into, this one college in Decatur, Georgia, gave me a full scholarship. And because I didn't have any money to pay, I chose that one, and I needed still ticket money and just a couple of $100s to make the journey. And I borrowed that from an uncle. Anyway, long story short, when I landed in Decatur, Georgia, which is very different 24 plus years ago, my first semester, I faced everything from being almost gang raped, gun violence, like welcome to America, dirty South, it was called back then. It was also a time in hip hop era, the dirty South, legendary Southern hip hop was coming out and booming in the rest of the world, like bands like Outkast was a major thing. So, but now that I look back, if I wanted to experience America, like let's say if I came to California or somewhere else, I wouldn't really experience real America. The culture, the South, the music, the food that I experienced going to Decatur, Georgia at that time was probably one of the best blessings of my life. And it was during college years that I got a grant because I was double majoring at that time in studio art and psychology. I got a grant to go to India and visit and study with different groups of women who were using art as therapy. And it was on that trip that I ended up, call it an accident or fate or karma, with a group of Tibetan former nuns who lived in northern part of India in a place called Dharamsala, which at that time I had no idea all the differences. I didn't know much about what was going on inside Tibet. I was barely surviving during college, working so many different odd jobs to make it through. And then these women who had gone through intense physical and mental and emotional torture in their lifetimes, a number of them just mutilated physically, like lost breast, sterilized, woke up to know that they can never bear children again, because the Chinese Communist Party had a long term program to sterilize Tibetan women, so they couldn't reproduce anymore. And so these women had nothing, their nation gone, their spirituality all tarnished. Some of the nuns were made to strip. Yet they were sitting there doing all these modalities and practices for removing the negative karma from their so-called enemies or perceived enemies, right? These prison guards that tortured them, and each of them were glowing such joy and bliss, and it was such a slap on my ego at that time. I don't think I'd ever forget that moment that I thought I had it wrong. I thought everything, because I was not in a good place at that time, growing up, didn't have a role model to look up to. I lost my mother, father, older brother was, no one was there. And I thought all the wrong things happened to me. And then, I grew up in a culture of revenge. Not that I seeked revenge on my parents, but I was suffering. And then you end up with this beautiful group of people who had nothing but joy and positive energy. And, one of the practices that is now very popular, I saw some YouTube video of people guiding it. It's called Tonglen. It's all about taking in. Yeah, so that was...
Oh, no, I mean, go ahead. I'm saying, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
And
you
definitely
know what Tonglen, right?
I do, but define it for everybody.
I don't think I can define it, but the basic basic principle is to take in the suffering of other people, whoever you are practicing with or for, and then radiating compassion, love, and positive merits, and in some essence, even giving your positive karmas to benefit, taking on as much as you can. Not that everyone has the power to do that. I think all of us have to face our karma eventually. But yeah, and so in that trip, basically the timeline was I come back, move to West Coast with a guaranteed work at a time when, international students were having a hard time getting work permit. I had a secured work permit. It was right after 9/11. But in that flight back to Decatur, Georgia, I just knew that there was something in Dharamsala waiting for me. And I knew I had to go back, and I know nothing practically made sense. But in that flight back, I decided I have to go back. And I came back to Decatur, had a yard sale where all my professors came, bought very insignificant things like Nirvana poster and the lampshades and bed sheets, and had enough money for a one-way ticket back to Delhi. And I actually had to go back to Bangladesh after that to withdraw my work permit, because you cannot just go around with a work permit and not work. And then I thought I had no guarantee of what was going to happen in Dharamsala. I just knew I had to get back, and ended up living there for 7 years since I landed back there. So that's how I landed up in Dharamsala, which people who may not be familiar with is the exiled capital of Tibet, which is, it's called Dharamsala, but we call it short Dhasa to rhyme with Lhasa, the original capital of Tibet. So since 1949, hundreds and thousands of Tibetans have kind of come across the border, and the majority of the exiles or refugees that come out of Tibet, they usually land up in Dharamsala or in Nepal. So, do you want me to continue?
Well, first, no, I want you to say, I mean, how does a young Muslim woman get magnetized by Tibetan Buddhism? How did that happen?
Well, to begin with, I wasn't a good Muslim to start with. We were made to memorize the text since we were kids. So, I have recollection of being a kid and just like I finished the Quran. I forget how many times, but I did actually read the Quran in English much later as an adult because I wanted to do it. I don't have any. I think Islam is a beautiful religion, and it is a religion of peace. And with many other religions, there's the religious aspect of it, and then there's the cultural aspect of it. A lot of what, so even though, like I said, we were raised, so Bangladesh so my parents' generation lived through the liberation war. And it's literally only 50, like it was, what year are we on? 2024. So Bangladesh was born in 1971. So when it started out, our constitution was based in a very secular value. The whole idea was, because what is now Pakistan wanted it to be an Islamic state, wanted us to speak Urdu, and it was very different than Bengali culture. Bengalis originally were actually Hindus before the Mughal invasion. Buddhism, Buddha himself, the historic Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, has physically walked to what is Chadivaho and other places of Bangladesh 3 times. So we have a saying that, it's ingrained. The teaching is ingrained. It's not exported. Like in America, Buddhism has been imported, right? In places like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, where Buddha has technically, physically went and taught and delivered, from those lands, the teachings never go away. And in my earliest days in Bangladesh, I was actually in Chatibaho. So we grew up around a lot of Buddhists. All my earliest memories, Buddhist, One thing I must thank my mom is, like, she was more into Sufism, but she raised us with all principles, really. Like, one of my earliest memories being like totally freaked out in mazars. What's the English of mazar? Like the dargahs in India where Sufi chantings happen. And
temples.
What's the English word for temple?
It's not a temple, but it's a gathering place. Yeah.
Gathering place. And so seeing my mom with all this, like, Sufi kawals up there, and just like her going all transcendental with them, and me and my brother is having to drink all this rose petal water, not realizing what the hell is going on. So while that was also happening, we also went to Buddhist temples. So we were raised in very secular values. And as early as I can remember, I always had a connection with Buddha. No one taught me that, but I knew there was this is someone I value. And then when I first started, when I left on that city, Chittagong, on my own at the age of 13, someone from my father's office put me in an airplane on my own at the age of 13. That was my first flight on my own. And this is in Bangladesh. We women, girls are just put on, flight on their own at the age of 13. And I have this mental kind of like snapshot as a photographer, of various times in my life where I look down with an orbital perspective. So from the window of my plane leaving Chittagong. And at that moment, I felt like, oh, I'm leaving everything like Buddha did. I have
really
vivid recollection every time I left a place, even when I left Dhaka as an 18-year-old, looking down the plane and saying, oh, okay, I'm leaving everything. And so that connection with Siddhartha was always there. But what happened with Tibetans, that was more of an experiential connection where I went there and I was like, wow, this, even my dean of my college who was at that trip, she's like, Wasfia, I've never seen you in your elements like this. I've known you for almost 4 years now, and I've never seen you this in your elements. So what's going on? And everyone I met in Dharamsala, like everyone seemed like I knew them for lifetimes. Everything seemed familiar. And, some of these stories of when I met my teachers, it was just like, oh, I finally came home. Like I didn't feel good before. I never fit in.
Well,
till I met my teacher.
Yeah. Well, I want to leave some of the teachers to a little bit later, because I think it'd be great. How in the world did you move from a young Muslim woman to interest in Buddhism? How in the world did you start climbing mountains? Okay, I haven't even mentioned this to you all, everybody. Okay, Wasfia climbed to the top of K2, okay, and several other mountains in other continents, I believe, right? But I mean, this is not so. I can't even. I mean, forget it. Grand Canyon is it for me. I can't even go to the edge of that. Okay, but
I'm sure if you wanted to.
yeah. Well, maybe I'm enjoying the rush of adrenaline that I get that goes from the deepest part of my stomach to my head. I don't know.
Yeah.
But how
Well,
did you?
in order to say this, I do have to bring in a teacher because without him, I would have never started. So, okay. So I went to Himalayas. I was working in different. In the beginning, I started working for one news archive called Payul, which is motherland, which means motherland in Tibetan. And, for news, authentic news from inside Tibet to come out, it's very important because of the way Communist Party controls the media. So they needed someone to be inside out. I was kind of like an informer agent journalist, which is great for my 20s hot blood, the adrenaline. And then I volunteered the rest of my time in 4 different human rights organizations. And while I was doing that, a number of my colleagues just happened to be mountaineers. So back then, Himalayas or Nepal part of Himalayas was very different. There wasn't Starbucks up there like there is now. There wasn't any Irish pub. So over the weekend, we would just go off to these 5,000, 6,000 meter peaks, not realizing at that time. So if you follow a big mountain climber's career, generally they end up in the Himalayas towards the end. I, by default, started in the Himalayas, not intentionally, but I went for several expeditions just by fluke, and then I realized, wow, there's something in it that was very healing. Those were like pilgrimages, and also I must say at this point that in Tibetan culture, in Sherpa culture, Sherpas meaning the local inhabitants around Everest region, Sherpa means coming from the east, implying coming from the east of Tibet. And so technically they're Tibetan Buddhist. It's just a different dialect, the Sherpa language and Tibetan language. So it's just like, so if you understand Tibetan, you understand Sherpa. Very different, a similar culture. And spiritually, all of them, look up to His Holiness Dalai Lama as their god and main leader as well. They're just on this side of the mountain in Nepal side, right? The Sherpa approach to mountain and Tibetan approach to mountain is everything opposite to probably what majority people look at mountains as. We never approach. The approach to a mountain is how you get to the mountain. There are different phases we can go to. The whole approach, or in Buddhism, what we call is the view, is wrong for, I feel, how we look at mountaineers, and people think that mountaineers go out to conquer nature, whereas Tibetans look at these mountains, and not just Tibetans, I would say many of the South Asians, even in our culture, like we revere these mountains as the abode of gods and goddesses. Like Everest is a British dude's name. I have no intention to, because the script that we read before getting on the mountain, it's written to Myo Lang Sangma, who's the mother goddess of the universe, who resides in the mountain called Chomolungma, a feminine entity. And the script goes over and over, asking for permission her to walk on her body. We even bring in inanimate objects like the ice axe, crampons, everything, put it in the altar, ask for forgiveness ahead, as requesting her to clear the path and not throwing us off with an avalanche, and showing us signs that the road was cleared. And then the Lama waits for signs that the goddess has cleared our passage. And then that's only when we approach a mountain. So if there's any process involved, it's a one-off surrender, right? And just submitting everything. So I was very blessed, honestly, now that I look back, that was my intro to mountaineering. So that's how it started. But then it took a different mold when a beautiful man came into my life. Can I go into my teacher's now? I have to go into my teachers now.
Oh, no problem.
Well, His Holiness 14 Dalai Lama came into my life, and I would, I won't do justice by saying things on a podcast, but if everything that I've become today was because of him and how he showed me the way, not did it for me, but showed me the way that this is, and he's the main force behind me going back to mountains over and over again. All my big climbs, which con- consist of the highest of every continent, which is a record called the Seven Summits. Very few people had done it, and very few women at the time that I did it, especially as a South Asian. And then K2 was more recent, which is the second highest and considered the deadliest mountain on the planet. This was more recent in 2022 summer.
Oh, really? Just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so K2, again, British dude changed it. The local name is Choguri, which means king of all mountains. It's a masculine entity. And when you look at the map from space, you'll see the Himalayas, Hindu Kush, and then the Karakoram as a backbone, like literally through Asia. And Chomolungma and Choguri as the what we call in yoga, Idala and Pingala, like the masculine, feminine energy force. So when you look at it from space, there's no man-made borders, and it literally looks like the backbone of Asia and the Earth. It's freaking beautiful. So yeah, in K22 we did the same ritual of seeking permission from Choguri. And the energy, when you experience it in person, you'll see how masculine that force was, how aggressive it was. Whereas with Chomolungma, I feel like she always cradles us. And also there are certain things attached to it. It's like Chomolungma, she's the goddess of inexhaustible giving, which means that once you do the rituals properly, once you show her respect, she's going to give you whatever you want, and she's just going to keep continuing to give you, which has been the case for me for sure.
Wow.
I know I digressed a little bit.
No. Who did you go? How many people did you go up with the first time? The first climb?
Well, I've always had a very small team. The rule is that if you don't get along with someone in lower altitude, the chances of getting along in higher altitude is much worse. And I've always known that I'm super sensitive. My therapist gave me a label. In America, we have labels for everything. So I've only learned a lot of these terms in therapy in LA, which has been only last couple of years. What was it? It's called HP, highly sensitive beings. HS. She made me feel special, but yeah, HSB.
So it's that,
not the bad.
Not K2, it's HSB.
So as a highly sensitive person, because I can feel people's energy from miles ahead, I was always very protective. And so I try to keep it as short or small team as possible. But of course, it took a lot of time, trial and error, who you get along with, and majority of my climbs, it was just me and another person. And also, having said that, I have lost a lot of my climbing buddies on the mountains over the years. So
really?
Yeah. But oftentimes in some of these locations, you have to. So, for example, in K2, like Pakistan isn't that logistically modern as Nepal is in terms of mountaineering. So, a lot of times you share the team logistics, like the base camp logistics, with other teams. So, which I did. It was a huge team. But then when it comes to the actual climb, it's just me and another person. That's it. So, yeah, it's different from mountain to mountain. But Raghu, I also must remind you like this. So this is pre-Instagram when I did the 7 summits. And a lot of times, a lot of the locations I had to go to, Bangladesh didn't even have a diplomatic connection with majority of this location. So climbing the mountains to get to the continent in the first place was a bigger mountain to climb in
the mountain.
Than climbing the mountain.
Wow.
And, now we're in 2024. It's Everest season just closed, and yeah, it's just we're in a totally different era now.
Yeah. I mean, you see on social what's going on. I mean, I thought it was a joke. Hundreds of people, it looked like, following along this ridge. I mean, it's
I wish it
extraordinary.
was a joke. It's not, because when you lose people because of, this is with not just mountaineering, but like we're constantly having to, like athletes having to fight with this whole influencers culture, right? Where these people are going into these mountains where, okay, it might look great for your social media, but consider that you're putting so many people's lives at risk. The amount of shit show, if I may use that word, that I've seen on mountains myself, just in the last 10 years, it's beyond, like, everything from one person having 18 Sherpas putting 8 feet in front of her step by step, or doing, the TikTok shit that they do, like, while people are freezing, they're losing their brain cells in oxygen deprived environments. Because every season it's like, what other record we can do? There's this one guy who was trying to do this yoga stand on one of the Carvius Ridge line, while there's a whole traffic jam for hours because of his stupid shit. Like the base camp of Everest is every spring season. It's like a modern day Nepal version of Burning Man. It's one. It's like an hour or an hour and a half to walk from bottom to top, and there's all kinds of shit shows on where human sanity and greed lives. Someday I'll make a documentary and bloopers behind the scene on it, hopefully.
So, boy, but it's just a reflection of everything that's going on in our world, is it not?
Yeah, but I also want to remind people that is just one specific season. Like now, I don't even go back in that season anymore. I always take my clients in the fall season, and the mountains are still pure. The mountains are still sacred, and that region will always attract crazy people like us. So Everest will never lose its magnetism, obviously, but yeah, like not to judge Nepal based on those images only, because that's the only thing that gets out. No one shows the path when it's empty. I've been in the region when it's pin drop silence.
Wow.
There are many ways to do it.
What was so your first time in summiting? I mean, K2 or any one of them, any mountain. What is the deepest feeling in that moment?
Yeah. So in my last 20 years, let's say I've climbed the same mountain, let's say Denali, which is the highest mountain of North America. It's in Alaska.
Yeah.
It's also the longest mountain on the planet. Like Everest is the highest. Denali is the longest. That mountain killed me. I climbed that 3 times. But I'm just giving that as an example because it depends on which state of mind and life we're at. That same path going up and down was very different for me all 3 times because of the certain traumatic state I was in life and the crazy things that I was dealing with at that time. And I can give you more examples, like the Everest Base Camp trek. It's not summiting a mountain, but it's still one of the high altitude treks that people take. I've over close to 70 treks of Everest Base Camp alone. So that trail, I've walked that so many times, but it's very different every time. But
really?
In terms of the overriding feeling, and if I may share this experience from Chomolungma, which I was only 29 at the time that I climbed it, and there was a lot of pressure from me, from this lone woman from Bangladesh, a country of 170 million people, like the media attention that was there, and I really didn't want that because I felt like there was no room for error, and no matter what I was doing, I was being judged and all of that, right? But that mountain, and I did it, His Holiness Dalai Lama was throughout that climb, pre-climb, post-climb, during climb, he was praying and he advised me. And shortly before summit push, this is I'm talking about, like literally after 2 months being on the mountain, my last camp got destroyed in an avalanche. And there was basically no hope of me summiting anymore. And which meant basically I have to go all the way back to base camp, carry all the load that it took me weeks and months to get up here with my climbing partner, and then make the push within, I think there was 5 days left on the season.
Wow.
And at the moment when I was going to give up, I was sleeping in Camp 2. Going back to Camp 3. So Camp 3 I was on Lhotse phase, which is kind of like very, very... it's a deadly phase, and we've placed the camp there, and then Nima came. Nima was my climbing partner. He's passed. He's like also my climbing teacher. He's my brother. He's depicted in the short film that was released in 2016 that people can check out on my website if they have an interest to. But Nima just came in and said, Didi, meaning sister, we're not going up tonight. Should we just go down and sleep tonight? Because there's basically a rule that the more you can sleep in lower, like there's no point in sleeping in higher height, because you lose brain cells at a rate that it's not replaceable. So, and I just literally spontaneously shrugged my shoulder and said, yeah, let's go sleep downstairs, meaning Camp 2. And then as we were rappelling down the rope, we hear this huge crack on top, and I thought it was an avalanche coming at us. But what happened, there was a higher avalanche, which made this ice serac fall off. And as we're coming down, we see it being hit in the tent that we were just in.
No.
The two Sherpa people who were right beside us, one's entire backbone was damaged, one lost left side. So by the time we figured this all out, went back to camp, so that whole entire camp was destroyed. Camp meaning our supplementary oxygen that we were going to use for summit push, me and Nima, our food ration, our tent, everything gone. And one thing sticking out of that ice rubble is a broken part of the amulet that His Holiness Dalai Lama had sent me to Everest with. And it was cracked literally in the middle and in 2 pieces. I collected it. I actually took it back to His Holiness after the climb. So that was specifically done for Chomolungma. And then I had a dream in Camp 2, like almost like a force from my heart chakra pulling, like a feminine entity, just saying, no, don't give up. This is your time now. And, I have a more articulate version in my journal, but this happened so long time ago. And that entire last push, going back to base camp, carrying all our loads after 2.5 months, back to Camp 3, setting up camp again. And then going for the summit push, that entire time, I felt a feminine force that was pulling me throughout the whole push to the summit, 29,029 feet and back. And just like, by the time I reached the summit, all your, like, I don't know how it happens with other people, but all your life's memory, insignificant, significant, it didn't matter, like random people who you may have crossed in Heathrow Airport to like very epic stories, all flashing through your memories. And at the same time, you're crossing dead bodies after dead bodies after dead bodies,
Really?
Yeah, like in Dead Zone, which is above 26,000 feet, there's an approximate 250 dead bodies. Why it's called
Dead Zone.
Dead Zone.
Wow.
And so just on the summit push alone, I crossed 7 dead bodies, out of which 5 I had known personally in base camp and tea with. And so in this altered oxygen state, the first thought that comes to your mind when you see a dead body, or at least to me, is like, oh, I could be next. And it's then from there, it's very easy to go on a negative spiral, you know? And so to really mentally stay put, but throughout this whole time, the overriding emotion was of gratitude, of having this short time. And I still remember like sitting on the summit crying and just like, I was like, I'm going to bring all my children here. Everyone needs to experience this gratitude. And then I was looking down into the valley and then realizing, like, as soon as I get down, this is all going to be over. We're going to get caught up in the nastiest shit in the human realm. We're going to keep fighting, which happened actually. I literally came down and saw all my entire life changed, which we'll talk about later. And then as I was reaching the summit, like literally, then the sun started coming up from Tibet side. And that is a moment that I could have never planned on my own, because nothing works according to plan on mountains like Everest. And so I had the blessing to watch sunrise on top of the world with just me and Nima. That's it. And there was not a single soul on the summit. And till today, that's the most beautiful experience of my life. Oh. And then I did a little naughty thing.
Oh?
In 2007, 5 years before my summit, Everest summit, I was banned from Tibet and kicked out with a copy of His Holiness's Art of Happiness. It's a meditation book.
Yes.
I don't know if you've read it.
We know it. Yeah.
And on the cover, it is just him with a smiley face. So the officer ripped that cover, threw the cover at me. I was arrested. Long story, he got saved. So before he got me out of the border, the last line he had told me that you can never step into Tibet again. And since 2007, I applied several times and I didn't get to step into Tibet again. So when I reached the summit, technically the border of Tibet goes on the summit of Everest. And I took that cover that I was expelled with 5 years before the summit. And I told Nima, if he was down with me, Nima was like, do it, sister. We're feeling good. So we rappelled about less than 100 meters, but officially so we could tell we were on Tibet side. Technically it was illegal because I didn't have the Tibet permit. Yeah. But the Chinese cops couldn't come in that zone. Yeah, and then I took that picture with the cover and I said, I stepped into Tibet again and there's nothing you can do about it. And then I presented that picture to His Holiness Dalai Lama. So there's a picture of Dalai Lama holding a picture of me, holding a picture of him inside Tibet. And I think I felt more accomplished doing that than the summit itself, because I honestly don't think anyone has a right to tell us whose thoughts we can subscribe or not subscribe to. So that felt really, really liberating. Wow. I digressed again. Your question was completely something else.
No, it's all perfect. Fast movement here to some of the incredible. So Wasfia was meeting, of course. You've mentioned His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but you have been involved with several other Rinpoches, a few of which I myself have had the great opportunity to meet. But it's really extraordinary that this combination of what you've done in terms of going and doing the mountaineering and the experiences that you've had, this incredible one you just described, and then meeting His Holiness the Dalai Lama, meeting the 17th Karmapa, meeting Mingyur Rinpoche. These are all extraordinary individuals, as well as so. Wasfia and I talked about when we chatted just to get to know each other a little bit a couple of weeks ago. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. And I unfortunately never did meet him. I could have, and whatever karma was going on then, but I feel like I do know him anyhow, just through his pictures and his written works and the beautiful film on him, which was really fantastic. And then I come to find that Wasfia also was very, very much drawn to him, and in particular to his tulku, which is when a master leaves this planet, they usually leave signs as to where their reincarnation can be found. So I just thought that's a beautiful story, of your meeting, because I think I said at the end of our conversation, well, can you take me to Kathmandu? I want to meet
Let's go.
Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. But talk about him in particular. Everybody out there, I have mentioned Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche many, many times, read from some of his works. He he's a gentle giant of a man, on one hand, full of love, but totally uncompromising on bullshit, which is what endeared me to him when I first started reading. But talk about your experience through this tulku of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche.
Yeah, he's just like the previous, except a little more, if I may say, modern, and like he uses the F word more frequently than I do. He's very connected to the current world, but then he shapeshifts between the previous Dilgo and this reincarnation. Like even at this age, forget about this age. Let's say 10 years ago, the power he had. I don't remember if I shared this story. Previous Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, one of his last recording in Bhutan before he went into parinirvana was, apologizing to his caretakers and assistants, saying, because he was very big, right? He's huge.
6'7", I think, for a Tibetan person. That's, I mean, unheard of.
Yeah. And so in his older age, he had to lean on other people. So he was saying that I've suffered, anyone who's heard Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche speak, he was so sweet when he talked. It was just such a grandpa. This just everything he said was very sweet. And he was just saying over and over again that I've made you suffer so much. In my next life, I'll come very short. And if you look at the current incarnation, he hasn't grown beyond what he was in his 20s. He's remained short. He lives on his own. So I need to backtrack to Karmapa to tell about Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. Because it was really unfortunate to, of course, even having met Karmapa at the age that we did. So just to put into context, I'm 41 now, we'll be 42. Tibetans add another year because of the time you were in your mama's womb. So technically I should be 43. But I grew up, or I had the blessing to know both Karmapa and Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche at a time when they were also growing up in their 20s and 30s. So I feel like now that I look back, it's like it was, yes, I was seeking them as a teacher, and they also were treating me as a student. But, if anything, and I said this to you before, it's an old friendship that came back, the way, nothing that has happened with my teachers are karma just from this life. It cannot be that strong. And like many of my teachers also say, the connection we have, it's many, many, many past lives. For whatever reason, we have taken these incarnations at this time, and the work hasn't even started yet. I feel like Buddhism in general is in a very, especially Tibetan Buddhism, given the geopolitical aspect of it and where it needs to be preserved for the next millennia. I feel like, as Buddha said in his time, is like my teachings can be adopted. If it's not serving the current time, then reject it, And even the Dalai Lama always says that if any part of Buddhism doesn't match with scientists' findings, I will reject it. And so I feel like Karmapa, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, like this, there's this whole new generation of lamas who are rejecting their thrones, who are rejecting the old way of functioning in a monastery, and now making the teaching available for anyone and everyone who's willing to take it.
And Mingyur Rinpoche, we should put him in that.
Mingyur Rinpoche too, yeah. I mean, yeah, but he's a bit more senior than us, so we're not senior, but
you,
older.
not
yeah, yeah, for me, yeah. So I wouldn't. He's still a, it's a cultural thing in Asia. I would not refer to him as a. He's my friend, but he's older than me. Anyway, your question was how it happened. So for years, I was going to. So Karmapa and I. So I met His Holiness Dalai Lama and Karmapa both kind of around the same time, back to back, right? First was Dalai Lama and then the Karmapa. And, he gave me, I actually took my first refuge with him, and with Karmapa, he gave me my Tibetan name going into trance, which is Karma Yusen Lamu. But he would refuse for years to give me any kind of tantric empowerment. He would give me other teachings, but he said, no, you have to give it from your, we call it the root Lama. And I would be fighting with him. I'm like, you are my root Lama. What the hell? Yeah, like, I'm not going to go find another Lama. And then he would just send me off on these different kind of, I wish they just gave me direct direction. It doesn't never work like that. They give you vague instruction and then you go on a journey. So he kept saying to me that you go to Nepal every other month and you can't find your teacher. So that gave me a clue that, okay, so on one trip, I went and literally took every single Lama that I knew in Nepal to lunch or dinner or coffee to see if there was a connection. And all these Lamas are like, okay, Bengali, practitioner has come and going all that. But with no one, and then this one last Lama I met, I was like, did Karmapa really mean his? This can't be my root Lama, right? So I go back to Karmapa, I was like, please don't send me to him because I don't think he's my root Lama. And he looked at me in disappointment and he rolled his eyes and he's like, you go past him every time and you still don't see him. And he made a noise. And I was like, okay. And then he meeting off. Next time I go back to Kathmandu and I'm doing my Kora, which is circumambulation around Bodh, which is the largest stupa. And literally stopped at one point where Karmapa said, you'll go past him every time. And I looked left and there was a sign for Sechin Monastery. And I was like, how did I miss in that trip, like every single Lama, but I didn't meet the head of Sechin, which honestly, I thought Dilgo was going to be too high for me to reach to. I was just like functioning. I was like, no, that. So I went straight to Sechin without any meeting, no appointment, nothing. I told the assistant who was there was an assistant Lama who was downstairs. I said, I really need to see Dilgo Khyentse and Yangtze. He goes up and comes back and said, go up, he's been waiting for you. So I go up and Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche Yangtze was sitting on his little sofa with a kata. He's like, he looked and I said, and the first thing he says, just looked at me smiling, he said, that took you long. So between Karmapa and Dilgo, of course, they never talk on phone or exchange letters. Both knew what was going on, but I had to find my root guru by myself. And it was that same, again, recognition of meeting Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, coming home, like a father figure coming back in my life. But also, one of the things I would say is, has been, whether you want to call it as a practitioner or just as a human being, is like none of my 4 teachers, including Mingyur Rinpoche, who's more my meditation teacher, has ever said, you should be doing this, or never imposes anything. In fact, anytime I've been, because in the beginning as a practitioner, I speak to Krishna about this all the time. I used to get very clingy to my teachers. And they do everything to send you off on your own journey and reminds you that you are your own guru at the end of the day. And I think that is the biggest teaching of it all, is like, yes, there is a teacher-student connection that has continued all the way from Buddha's time to now, which is the Karmapa's lineage, one of the longest running lineage in the Tulku system. And it's an oral tradition, but ultimately we are our own teachers and we are our own gurus, and we're all here in our own individual karmic path. And what are we doing with it? Only in the last 2 years that I've been in LA, working on my memoir, I realized that 14 generation ago in the family that I took birth in, my great grandfather's grandfather, 14 generation ago, was one of the main guys who destroyed Buddhism in what is now what used to be Bengalis. So, back then when the Mughals came, they had one was the preacher, one was the warrior protector. So Qutub Shah's protector, who was we read his poetry throughout high school years. Bhakti Khilji's he's considered almost close to a prophet. His horse till today is buried next to my grandfather's. So this happened 14 generations ago in my own family line. So kind of strange that I chose that family.
Really? It's unbelievable.
So I still don't know why. I'm still unfolding this journey. So, but yeah, so that was my first meeting with Khyentse Rinpoche. But then, I don't see a difference between him and the previous, because I've seen him many times in his previous incarnation.
Wow.
And often even, like if you talk to him on the phone or sometimes, like he literally sounds like the older Dilgo.
Oh, really?
It's crazy. And it's when you've seen him physically, that's why another quote by him, he always reminds me, never judge a book by its cover, which I also want to say about him. It's like, don't judge these teachers by their cover. It's like they might look less than 20-year-old, but you have no idea who they are.
How old is he now?
He's 30-something.
Oh, 30.
Well,
just hearing all this and then thinking of my own experience 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, I went back to India, hadn't been there since the pandemic. And there was one place that Krishnadas and I and Ramdas and some others gathered together in the Kumaon, way in the north. And it was a place called Kosani. And we were in a Gandhi ashram meditating. We were waiting for a Buddhist meditation teacher that never came and left us to our own devices. And Maharaji just kept, Neem Karoli Baba just kept sending people up. Oh, Ramdas is up in the mountains. Go, just getting rid of them, go up, all these hippies. And so there we were. This place, you sat on a ledge and the entire horizon was, 24 to 27, 8,000 foot peaks. And one of them is called Trishul. And it looks like the trident of Shiva. And I felt this great affinity towards it. So I wanted to go back, take my partner, Katrina. And we got somehow lucky and we're staying in a place that, as the crow flew, maybe 75 miles, from this place, right on the border, near the border of Tibet. And I remembered the attraction that I had towards this particular Himalayan mountain. And it was after I saw this mountain, I experienced this mountain after I first met Neem Karoli Baba. And it was synonymous. The feeling, the expansiveness and spaciousness and connectivity to the truer part of myself. And it was absolutely, completely one. And I realized that when I went back, this is in 22. So everything you're saying, when you speak about the experience with these mountains and the experience with these incredible siddhas that we have amongst us still now is quite extraordinary.
Mm.
Quite extraordinary. Well, I thank you for being here. We're at the end. We have to do part 2,
Are we?
3, 4. Yeah.
Oh.
We're already, Zoom. Literally.
We didn't even dive into, but yeah, we'll do part 2, part 3.
No.
Maybe.
We if you don't mind, we can just absolutely continue, when we get another moment.
Before we close, I do want to extend a formal invitation. Honestly, a part of me, like the concept of Bayul, right? It's like the sacred places. So, for example, Everest, what we call is Everest region, is a Bayul. It's a sacred place that Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, who's considered the second Buddha according to many Tibetans, lotus born. He hid all these treasures for different times, especially the Kali Yuga time, different teachings in different parts of the Himalayas, and they're called Bayus, protective regions. And very few tartans, we call it treasure revealers, which was one of the last ones, Dilgo Rinpoche's Yangtze's father, right? Very few of them left who can go in and then decipher. Like they would be in samadhi for hours and actually is inside that ocean, like deciphering what the teaching has been left with the Nagas or the serpent queens. So I just feel like we're at a time where, we have full access to these teachings now, which wasn't the case back in, when even Tibet wasn't, was free. And then we have access to these teachers, but I don't know how long they're going to stay. I don't know how long this Bayul's going to stay. So whatever we can to really spread the teachings for the modern time. Buddha was a scientist. He was not a religious entity, as he always said, that never followed me like that. So I think it's very beneficial and needed for the current state of humanity that we're in. And I hope we can do some justice. And maybe in the next talks, one could happen straight from Kathmandu when you visit us and visit Khyentse.
When are we going?
Anytime I'm up. I'm trying to convince KD for years. Like hopefully we can all make a trip soon.
I don't know if I told you, but I wrote him. I said, "Oh, maybe we could go with Wasfia," and he said, "Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Except we probably wouldn't come back." That's what he said.
Probably not. It'll be beautiful.
But that's
I know
okay
whenever that happens. But you have an invitation whenever you and KD schedule matches and also visit Macho Mulungma's region and see. Have you been yet? No.
No.
To Everest region?
No.
Oh, well.
No. I was very one-pointed. I found this thing, and I was just going to stick with that thing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That Neem Karoli Baba thing. Wow, so great to have you
Raghu.
here. Just love
great
hanging.
to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Everybody, we're going to line you up with links, lots of links, all the different masters that we're speaking about. And, of course, Wasfia, she has a wonderful site with all sorts of different wonderful connectivities from blogs that you've done. You did that. I wanted to talk. Yeah, we have so much we could go on about. There was this one thing I noticed with Karmapa 17 around animals and our interaction with them that I think that's one of the most wonderful things that he represents. I wanted to go into that whole thing. So yeah, part two.
To be continued.
Yeah. All right. We will see you next time, everybody. This is Mindrolling on Be Here Now Network. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com. And there are so many wonderful teachers that are sharing there. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.